Coming up later in the show, Farmers to Action founder Justin Rogers is here to discuss their campaign to support British farmers and fight back against the current government's war on food production. But first, Ben Habib is a British politician and businessman who leads Advance UK, a new political party launched following his departure from Reform UK due to internal disagreements. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. What sparked your leap into politics? Obviously, you're a successful businessman, you've got property roots. Surely you didn't need the hassle of politics, right?
Well, I definitely didn't need the hassle. I think from a purely personal perspective, I wonder what possessed me at the time. But essentially, my first sort of wake-up call was in 2016 when Mark Carney and George Osborne were lying about the economic impacts of us simply voting to leave the EU. And that kind of raised my antenna and disabused me of the notion that I'd carried all my life, that the political class basically knows what it's doing and does its best for the British people. I could see two very senior, one governor of the Bank of England and the Chancellor of the Exchequer lying to the British people. And that, as I say, got me sort of aware. And then we won the vote to leave. And then Theresa May came in and she said she'd get Brexit done. And again, I retired back into the background. But of course, she didn't get Brexit done. And she basically, again, hoodwinked the British people. And then when I heard that Nigel Farage was setting up the Brexit Party, someone said, do you want to meet him? I said, yeah, why not? And again, in my own mind, I had classified Nigel Farage as a kind of racist, xenophobic, sort of swivel-eyed lunatic because of the way he was painted in mainstream media. But I liked him. He was none of those things. I met him. I liked him. He was none of those things. He said, do you want to join the Brexit Party? And I said, yes. And I haven't been able to get off the conveyor belt since then. And I have a view that I have a commitment actually to the British people now, having stood as an MEP, held office, made public pronunciations, galvanized the British people in many respects to have that fight for an independent, sovereign, prosperous United Kingdom. I feel now I must stand my ground, stand on the political battlefield and continue proverbially fighting until we have prevailed. Roughly, that's my journey.
Speaking of lying politicians, as you said, what's your take on Britain's political mess now? Ben, I'm at the opinion where I'm thinking it's got to the point where Labour are destroying the country intentionally. Like, I understand you could start off with its incompetence. Now I'm looking at what they're doing. I'm thinking, surely they must know what they're doing. How will Advance UK, should you come into power, how would you tackle the current situation in Great Britain?
So to a greater or less extent, I think all the main parties that have governed this country in the last 30 years, well, Labour and the Conservatives, and even now Reform to quite a significant extent, basically are producing policies, visions, which come through what I call the global order. They're not interested in the prosperity of the United Kingdom. They are governing by global principles. They see their job really as delivering prosperity for the globe. And this is the generous interpretation, delivering prosperity for the globe. And if they do that, then, we as a nation will prosper. They don't make any differentiation between the interests at a national level for this country and the people of this country from the interests of anyone else. And we've had a number of laws passed which actually embed that form of thinking, like the Human Rights Act, Equalities Act, and so on. And British citizenry has been set aside. And in keeping with the hijacking of the political establishment by this view that they need to govern through a global prism, they've passed laws and they've passed policies and managed our economy, managed our culture, our constitution in a way that has been deeply damaging to the nation state of Great Britain the nation state of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And so I think we've got to a point, Gareth, where we are now actually facing a threat at the end of our country. We have a country without borders. We have a country where part of it is governed by a foreign power, Northern Ireland, and subject to foreign courts adjudication. That's the kind of result you get when you've been defeated in war. And yet we've voluntarily brought this onto ourselves. We are incapable of defending ourselves. We're completely combobulated in our commonsensical approach to life. We're told that men can be women, men can go into women's prisons, women's loos, and so on and so forth. And I can go on and on and on. But we are in such a bad place at every single level: constitutional, cultural, economic, obviously massive democratic deficit, that we face this existential threat. Yeah.
So you would focus on the United Kingdom first, rather than looking through this global prism, as you say.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the mission statement of Advance UK, the new party that we've launched, it basically has four principles to it, four legs. One is the nation state of Great Britain and Northern Ireland in all its parts and all its people, recognizing our constitutionally Christian our Christian constitution, as opposed to Christian culture, which I think comes from our Christian roots in our constitution. So that's the first thing. The second thing is standing for freedom of speech, a rejection of the indoctrination of our children with all these extreme ideologies, some of which I've just discussed, standing for democracy in this country. And of course, if you stand for democracy in this country, you've got to be able to define what this country is, because that is the democratic unit which we represent. So the nation state is also important. And under democracy, we've got to eject from our domestic legal fabric the control of supranational institutions, the application of international law that prohibits us from doing what's right for the country. And of course, also remove from our fabric all those unelected bureaucrats who increasingly have more and more power, OBR, Ofcom, Elcom, etc., etc. Supreme Court, I think, needs to be abolished. We need to go back to the form of governance that we had, the form of judicial system that we had before the Supreme Court was created. And then lastly, equality under the law. We've allowed our country to practice a broken legal system. Lady Justice used to be blind. She dispensed her adjudications blind to the ethnic or social or economic backgrounds of the people that were tried through our courts. And now we've got a sentencing council that wishes to change the sentence you get depending on your ethnic background. We've got the police hijacked by diversity, equity and inclusion, targeting working class white people and allowing ethnic minorities effectively to run wild, run amok in our society. I mean, this is what we see all the time. And so we stand for nation state, freedom, democracy, and equality under the law. Four very basic things you think every main party would stand for, but they don't.
No, four things that I think a lot of the population of the United Kingdom could absolutely get behind. I mean, you mentioned Reform there. You were formerly, part of Reform, which obviously was born out of the Brexit Party. They've grown a lot in the last few years, and it seems now are at the current moment leading the charge against Labour in the polls, at least. You've come along, Advance UK. Essentially, you're kind of appealing to a very similar demographic of people. How do you think you will persuade those people that actually Advance UK are the people to follow, as opposed to Reform, where maybe they've got a little bit of skin in the game with them already?
Well, I think the persona of Nigel Farage, because Farage is Reform, Reform is Farage. The persona of Farage is an individual who stands unashamedly for the United Kingdom. He famously wears Union flag socks, and he wraps himself in the Union flag. But the reality of Nigel Farage is not the same as his persona. And I'm sure certainly people who are engaged closely in politics would have realized that he is taking on failed Conservative MPs who hold views which are antithetical to the views that I've just expressed through our mission statement. MPs like Jake Berry, for example, who voted Remain. How can you vote Remain and wish to restore the United Kingdom? He was pro-lockdown. He's pro-net zero, which is, economic emasculation on the altar of global principles of our economy. And so Reform, in the pursuit of power under Farage, is actually setting aside the principles that I've just described. And even though the persona of Nigel Farage may carry them, the reality is the opposite. Farage and Reform are basically becoming part of the Uniparty. And they are recruiting, as I mentioned, these kind of wet Tories, but they've also recruited former Labour members, former Liberal Democrats even, people that shouldn't be anywhere near a party that stands for the nation. And so I think slowly people will wake up to the fact, I think many people already have, but I think slowly the nation will wake up to the fact that Farage and Reform don't stand for what they, from a public perception perspective, used to stand for. And one of the things I've done, Gareth, with Advance UK, because I believe that there was a need for a new political force, but I wasn't sure that the people felt the same. And so I imposed a hurdle of 30,000 members before we applied to the Electoral Commission for registration. And I thought it would take about 6 months to get to this 30,000 member level. And just to put that into context, by the way, 30,000 is about 10 times as many members as UKIP has got. It's the number of members that Reform had got after 5 years of existing. I thought it would take about 6 months to get there. We've got there pretty much. We're 1,000 members short now of 30,000. We've got there in 2 months. And so I think the people are also with me. They want a party like Advance, which will stand for these core principles.
I think people can see now more in terms of the political pantomime. I think, before Reform came along, people had realised that it didn't matter who you voted for, the government got in. If it was Labour or if it was the Tories, it didn't really matter. Two cheeks of the same backside, for want of a better term. But then I look at how Reform have become, and I'm looking at it and going, it just looks like the bum's got one more cheek now, actually.
Absolutely.
Like you said, they've morphed into the same. One of the huge things, Ben, that people are talking about now is digital ID. Labour openly want it. They're not even pretending. And even Reform, MP Sarah Pochin said, she doesn't see a problem with it. Where do you and Advance UK stand on the subject of introducing digital ID here?
So one of the things I haven't mentioned is that the ever-increasing reach of the state, the imposition of the state into our private lives, its tentacles coming deep into what we do on a day-to-day basis. And of course, if you want to have an excuse to have ID, if you want ID, if you want your tentacles everywhere, you want ID. You want digital ID because then you can control and know where everyone is. And if you want to make the case for having digital ID, it's helpful probably for law and order to break down a bit, for there to be division in society. And I think you mentioned at the outset that you thought perhaps the Labour Party was deliberately going around doing damage to the country. And we're all aware of it, aren't we, Gareth, that law and order seems to be breaking down. There's an increase in violent crime, petty crime, knife crime, you name it. It's all getting out of control. We've got division, multiple divisions now within the United Kingdom between the various communities that have been created through multiculturalism. And it looks like things are going to get worse and worse and worse. And one of the consequences of this will be Starmer justifying digital ID. And on the back of that, people who should know better, people like Sarah Pochin, who, in my mind are intellectually seriously challenged, should actually recognize what's happening and say, no, we stand against digital ID because this is just giving the state even more power over us. What we stand for is freedom. One of the principles of Advance UK is freedom. Farage should stand for that. Reform should stand for that. It should reject digital ID, and it should go to the root causes of the problems that might allow Starmer to claim digital ID is required. Go to the root causes of those problems and remove those problems so that we bring peace back to our society and law and order is re-established without having to move to more draconian measures like digital ID. And indeed, I don't know if you ever do this, Gareth, but I often look at what's happening in France and I see ever increasing draconian measures used by the state to try and suppress the French people when they complain about the way that they're being governed. And those draconian measures are often welcomed by those who want law and order because they want law and order. But actually, that's not the answer. We've got to remove the problems, and then we don't have to have draconian policing. I don't want to give the state any more power than it's got. I want to strip the state of power and empower the people.
Well said. Well said. Another thing, that's huge for you to say that you would oppose digital ID. A lot of people listening to this will be encouraged by that. It's so right in what you're saying about France, just how close Macron and Starmer clearly are, shows that they see the world in the same way. Something that we're seeing quite a lot in terms of digital ID. So you've mentioned there about the falling down of law and order. Absolutely. Another part of it is the mass immigration that, the boats that are coming over. Labour are using that as an excuse to introduce digital ID. Can you see, people almost slightly more on the right getting hoodwinked by that because they'll think, well, if it solves that.
They are being hoodwinked. I mean, they are being hoodwinked and they don't get it. And the other thing that they're going to be doing now, and there'll be a knee-jerk reaction in favor of it, will be bring back the death penalty. There are going to be calls for the death penalty. And instead of realizing that we're only making those calls for the death penalty because society is not being governed properly, instead of recognizing that and realizing we need to govern ourselves properly, we'll all be saying, yeah, bring it back. We want more draconian measures and empowering the state again to take lives. We can discuss the state's control now, even of who is born and who dies. That's already happening. But they'll try and bring capital punishment back. And the so-called right wing, I don't believe in left or right anymore. I think it's the liberal global order that I discussed. And those of us who want to run the country, by national principles. And they class those of us who love our country and believe in it and want to govern it through national principles as being right wing. But for the purpose of this discussion, let's accept that we are right wing. Those on the right will have a knee-jerk reaction if they don't think it through to welcome these more punitive mechanisms by which we're governed. And we've got to have the presence of mind to reject it and to make sure that we put freedom at the heart of our policy making and thinking.
100%. I mean, the death penalty, you're absolutely right, Ben. I've heard people talking about that quite a lot in terms of, I know social media is not real life, but they are people discussing it. And for me, like you're like I say, a knee-jerk reaction. You're allowing the state to essentially kill its citizens. That is a very slippery slope because people look at it and go,
that's ultimate power.
Yeah, absolutely. And they go, yeah, but it's for people like so-and-so. And you're like, as if it's not going to be used against you at some point, when they move the goalpost. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I'm sure if you're watching this, you're very much aware of the growing surveillance state emerging all around us. Whatever you do, you're being watched and your data being harvested. This is why Glenn and Eric Mader formed the Privacy Academy. Join the community designed to help overwhelmed non-techie people like me learn how to get private online. Head over to privacyacademy.com/Ike and learn how to exit the surveillance state with regular webinars exclusively for you. Now, back to the show. What do you say to people, Ben, that are watching this, that are kind of disillusioned with politics in general? I'm including myself in that, to be honest, where, it's the uni party, I'm done with it. How would you kind of not coax them towards Advance UK, but just kind of make the case to them that actually, no, we can do something?
So 16 million people roughly didn't vote in the last general election. There was only a 59% turnout, and I think there are about 46 million in the electorate. So a lot of people in this country are disillusioned with politics. And I think they're disillusioned with it because in the past, they voted repeatedly for things such as leaving the EU, and it didn't happen. They voted repeatedly. Every single government that has stood for election has said, we will bring down immigration, but they haven't. And Boris Johnson was the worst of the lot. He had an absolutely massive Boris wave of immigration from parts of the world, frankly, which add zero to our economic, constitutional, cultural betterment. Self-evidently, you just have to see the kind of people we're bringing into the country. That's not a racist comment. That is just a genuine observation. And so people look at that and they go, my God, I didn't vote for this. I voted for borders. I voted for national governance. I voted for cheaper energy. I voted for lower regulation. I want to be able to keep what I earn. I don't want to pay ever increasing taxes so the state takes all my money and does with it what it wants and usually very badly handles it. So people have been set aside by the state. The state turns its back on the people. And of course, it would turn its back on the people if it's governing through a desire to deliver global principles. And if it doesn't really care about democracy, because, if you stand for global principles and you stand for a set of extreme ideologies, the majority have to be told to shut up. And so I'm sure there are large swathes, increasing numbers of people who are disillusioned with politics. But we must not give up. We must fight on. And the reason I've launched Advance is so that we have a party in this country which will not bend, and we will not bend. We're not going to be like Reform. In the pursuit of power, we will not compromise our principles. We will stand firm on our principles which we believe to be true. And for the only principles, frankly, which will deliver this country back into some form of stability and restore it to some form of its former self. That is critical. And so I hope that we will get people back engaged in politics when they see the resolution with which we prosecute our mission. And what's quite interesting, Gareth, it's only anecdotal, but a lot of the members who've joined Advance so far, I often get texts and emails from them saying, I've never joined a political party before, but I'm joining you. I'm joining you. And I think they feel it. They can see that, I'm not messing about. And I've been very consistent. I'm human. I may have made errors in the past, but I've been basically very consistent since I got involved in politics, that we must have an independent, proud, sovereign, prosperous United Kingdom. And we must take all steps to get back to that. And that's what we're going to keep driving for.
Well, you've been given a huge boost in Advance UK by Elon Musk, of course. He's come out in support of you guys. People call him the kingmaker. So, he's got a massive influence over a lot of people. What would you say to kind of address fears that people have got about Elon Musk in terms of his influence and how that might clash with, say, local business interests, his business interests and British ones?
So, I don't know Elon Musk beyond having exchanged texts with him and having had one conversation with him. But I had a 20-minute conversation with him in January, and we covered a lot of ground in the 20 minutes. And the thing that really resonated with me and immediately drew me to him was the fact that, like me, he shares the view that Western civilization is facing its end, that the policies with which we're being governed are going to result in the end of our existence. And that's the salient issue. We can debate things around the edges. We may not agree on everything. But the salient issue is that Western civilization is threatened. And he's got a great love of the United Kingdom, like so many Americans do. They take their lead from the UK, indeed many parts of the world used to at least take their lead from the United Kingdom. They want a stable United Kingdom, because so often in the past, when other countries haven't known what to do in given circumstances, they've taken their lead from us. We've been a force for good in the world, and in the pursuit of these global principles, we've become a bit of a basket case. And so he sees, like so many Americans, that the UK needs to be put back together. Humpty Dumpty needs to be put back together again. And so in these fundamental principles, I'm completely aligned with him. And he sees also, just as you've done, Gareth, and others have, that Farage ain't the man. And so I haven't got a complete sort of index of all his different views. And then no doubt will be differences of opinion on certain issues. But I think we can live with differences of opinion on issues of subsidiary importance. The key thing is to save ourselves, to restore our country, to bring back our borders, to bring back our sovereignty, to make our politicians accountable, to improve the quality of politicians, to make our politicians understand that they must serve the British people. These are the critical things on which, we stand, which Elon Musk completely agrees with.
I think a lot of people, not just America, as you mentioned, but all over the world, are actually looking at the UK now almost in horror, actually. I was in Mexico earlier in the year, and I got asked several times by different people, some Americans, some from Canada, some from Europe that had moved out to Mexico, when are you leaving? Like, when are you and your family getting out of Britain?
Yeah.
Because, and I was like, I mean, I'm not a bulldog tattoo guy, but I was born here. My kids were born here. I'm an Englishman. I'm not leaving. You know, I want this place to be better. And I think there's a lot of people that would align with that. So I think
let me tell you something really interesting. I mean, it's really interesting, Gareth. So, you know, city boys, typically well-heeled city boys, are not that interested in politics because they've made money and they want to just, you know, go and do whatever they do, buy their fast cars and blah, 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 whatever. Yeah. But I'm getting approached by people who are extremely well-heeled, British citizens who've left the country, and they're saying, look, we know the UK needs change. We know reform isn't it. We want to meet you. We want to test you, and with a view to donating to you. These are people who don't need to be engaged in politics, don't need to be giving up any of their money, but many of them left the UK, as I say, and they want to give money to us because they can see that we hold the hope of the restoration of our country. And so, for example, I've got a dinner coming up in a couple of weeks' time where these people are flying in to meet me. I mean, it's a remarkable thing. And so I think the fight back has begun, Gareth. As despondent as we might all feel, I don't think it's too late. I think we can fight back. It's going to require Herculean efforts from a team of champions to deliver us back to a position of safety. But I think it's possible, and people are waking up. The more people that wake up to the reality, the more people that wake up to the need for all of them to get involved if they wish to save this country, I think, you know, the more likely we are to succeed. And I can see it happening. Well,
this week, Liz Truss, former PM, I mean, she was only Prime Minister for 5 minutes. I personally think she was stabbed in the back because she probably wasn't the right choice.
Completely.
They wanted Sunak. But she's come out and said that Britain needs a Trump-like government, basically a Trump-like revolution. Now, when I look at Trump and then I look at Starmer, you see them as polar opposites, really, at least in,
completely,
you know, on the way the media portrays them. But then I say, right, I see that obviously Trump's investing, I think it's 900 billion in this massive AI advancement. And then you've got Starmer saying that AI is going to be injected into the veins of the United Kingdom. So I'm thinking, well, they're polar opposites, but they're aligned on artificial intelligence. Where do you, if anywhere, sit on the use of AI and how that is, you know, potentially something quite dangerous in terms of, you know, jobs, for instance, with people losing their jobs?
Yeah. I imagine the way Starmer and Trump would come at AI would be from different ends of the spectrum. I imagine Trump would see it as a liberator of people being able to do more things more easily. And I can see Starmer trying to use it effectively to patrol the people. Perhaps this is a bit jaundiced of me. I don't think it is. But I can see him thinking this is yet another tool that he can use to deploy by the state. And I can see lots of draconian laws coming in around AI in the United Kingdom. The thing about AI is that we don't, any of us, really know where it's going to end up. It's obviously already beginning to be transformational. It's by no means going to replace humanity. I mean, I see all the AI that I use make mistakes repeatedly, giving me false, outcomes on questions that I ask when I go and test them, myself and do my own empirical kind of research. And, so I don't think it's there yet. We don't know how it's going to evolve, but it is obviously going to be a very significant change in the way we exist. It won't be the first time that technology has changed the way mankind conducts itself. But what we've got to try and do as that technology advances is to ensure that it doesn't set aside our rights and our freedoms. That's the key thing. I mean, it's really interesting. AI is not crypto, but it's really interesting. You look at the States, Trump is actually embracing cryptocurrency. I think he's making, allowing the Fed to hold it as a reserve. And in this country, we're embracing central bank digital currencies. Now, to the layman, they may look like the same kind of thing, but CBDC is effectively a government cryptocurrency. So it knows exactly what you're up to again. And, they want to get rid of cash. They very successfully, in fact, already pretty much got rid of cash in this country. And it goes back to this sort of ID card discussion that we were having. So as far as AI is concerned, we want to try and manage the position as AI develops to ensure that it isn't used as a tool by government to shut us down.
No, absolutely not. I mean, in terms of the cashless stuff, that's huge, and that's a really good point. I'm someone that, you know, is very vocal. Well, everyone here is about the fact that we need cash, because as soon as that's gone, suddenly, you know, if the state says no or computer says no, you can't then go, oh, that's fine, I can pay with cash then. And suddenly there's a lot of, a lot of dangers for people's freedoms in that sense.
A lot.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of AI, it's an interesting one because obviously, you know, on the Musk front, I mean, he said famously that he believes that AI could be the end of humanity, which obviously sends a, you know, it's like chill down your spine, really. What do you think he means by that? Do you think maybe he means what you're saying in terms of freedom, or something a little bit more sinister, actually?
It may be more sinister, I suspect. But who knows, Gareth? I mean, who knows where this ends up? I mean, do I think we're going to have a kind of Cyberdyne technology creation of Terminators that are going to go around and do you remember Cyberdyne become self-aware in the Terminator films? Can you remember the Terminator films?
I can, yeah.
And it becomes self-aware and then it takes control and it nukes the world. I mean, do I think that's going to happen? I don't think so. You know, I don't think so. But who knows? We're in uncharted territory, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm not sure you could come up with a policy to counteract that, to be honest, because that would be next level. The other thing that people speak about in terms of Advance UK, because you know, like you said, you know, nearly 30,000 members in a very short period of time, with Musk speaking about you, and obviously Rupert Lowe getting a lot of support as well. Your name is mentioned everywhere, and then Tommy Robinson obviously comes into the conversation. I was reading just this morning that Reform are actually suspending members if they're retweeting Tommy Robinson. You know, I mean, for me, like, I've interviewed Tommy. I've spoken to him a couple of times. We don't align on very much, to be honest. But it's clearly quite strange if you're a party like Reform, which is selling itself, as you say, as pro-freedom, but then is dismissing its members for retweeting someone.
So I've got a real issue in the political landscape with parties policing their membership. Every British citizen who has a vote should be a vote that is being pursued in the interest of democracy, pursued by political parties. It should do that. And if every political party pursues votes, then why have they got a problem with those same voters joining them as members? And so when Advance was set up, its constitution prohibits us as representatives of the party, board of directors of the party, or college members. You may be familiar with the college that the party has as its kind of intellectual makeup. It prohibits us from policing what our members are doing. The only criteria to be a member is that you are a British citizen on the electoral roll and you're not a member of another political party. And beyond that, it's not relevant to me. Indeed, you know, for the sort of pearl-clutching, you know, bleeding heart liberals, so-called liberals who get offended by what people say every 5 seconds, actually, it's a universal human right under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Articles 20 and 21, that people should have the right of political association. It's in fact wrong to be throwing people out of political parties based on their views. It stands against Articles 20 and 21 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Tommy Robinson has every right to be a member of a political party. Now, does that mean I endorse all Tommy Robinson's views? Of course not. He's a member. I represent the party. It's him who is endorsing our views, and all we've got so far is the mission statement. He's obviously read the mission statement, the nation state, freedom, democracy, equality under the law, and he likes what he's seeing. He likes our fortitude, our absolute resolution that we will not bend. He likes that. And so why shouldn't he join as a member? And I hope, Gareth, that at the end of this, you will join as a member. Even if we don't align on everything, if you buy into the mission statement and you want to save this country, you should be entitled to join. And I won't be, no one in my party would be looking back at what you've tweeted or said on Facebook to decide whether or not you're worthy of us. If I want your vote, which I do, you are worthy of joining as a member.
It's so interesting you say there, like, you don't have to align on everything. Now, I'm old enough, Ben, to remember when that was the case. And I think Brexit and that whole division that was created by the media, to be fair, which was massively a Remain media, almost stopped that happening, where you didn't have political chats in the pub anymore. Because you used to have them. You used to, have a few beers, and so someone would say something, you go, I ain't sure about that, mate. Anyway, what you having? Yeah. That's suddenly, that's gone. Suddenly, like, I can't talk. And then he's blocked me on Facebook. We've been mates 20 years. Like, it's crazy. Just finally though, Ben, can Advance UK win the next election? Because it sounds like a stupid question, but some parties are like, well, no, we're going to try and build a movement. It's a protest vote for a few years maybe. Would you think that actually, no, in 2029, we can do it?
So I'm in it to win it. I wouldn't do this if I didn't think there was an appetite for it. The cultural propensity of the electorate to vote either Labour or Conservative, that's gone. That is completely broken. And there have been many polls done where one of the options is none of the above. Polls which have included reform and none of the above. And none of the above, as far as I'm aware, has always won. So the British people aren't entirely happy, even with reform as an option to vote for. And I've got no idea how the electoral mathematics is going to look in 2028. To be absolutely frank, I've got no idea how it's going to look. But there are a few things of which I'm entirely confident and absolutely certain. Advance UK is going to do a hell of a lot better than people think. We're going to take significant vote share. And I suspect that's going to come off reform, because the Conservative Party has pretty much lost that vote share that it used to get from sort of people who believed in this country and so on. The small C Conservatives, I think, to the extent that they were going to leave the Conservative Party, have already left. We're going to do a lot better than people expect. Now, the question then turns on, will you do well enough to form a government in your own right? That I can't answer that question yet, but we're in it to win it. And the second thing I would say is that the next government in this country will be a pro-British government. I know that sounds very hopeful when you look at the complexion of politicians around, but the British people are already there. One of the mistakes Farage is making is that he thinks by pivoting towards a kind of uniparty position, he'll get more support. He's missing the mood of the electorate. The electorate right across the board wants a pro-British party. It's why 17.4 million people voted to leave the EU in 2016. The British people haven't changed. They still want what they voted for in 2016. And the Advance UK, frankly, is the only party that will deliver it. So the challenge for us is to basically connect with the electorate. Can we connect sufficiently with the electorate between now and 2029 so that we get to the magical 35% polling figure that's required to form a government in our own right? But even if we don't, I'm absolutely confident that our presence on the political landscape will ensure that the next government is a pro-British government.
Ben, thank you so much. It's been great to talk to you, and I'd love to catch up with you further down the line. I'm sure there'll be lots more insanity in this country to discuss, but really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
That's all for the free section of this week's Gareth Icke Tonight. If you'd like to continue watching the episode, I'm joined by Farmers to Action founder Justin Rogers. He's here to discuss their campaign to support British farmers and fight back against the current government's war on food production.
If average Joe on the street can see that there are people trying to do something not just on the behalf of themselves but behalf of everyone, that's why our key message is abolish inheritance tax for all.
Please click the link in the description and head over to Ickonic.com to continue watching. You can subscribe instantly for just £1.99. Good night.